I always tell players, we want to do enough right that the principles in our shot are almost the same, but how we're going to get into it is going to vary. And you're going to earn that variability through doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, to the point where you now understand that I can move this way and still have a really good chance of making the shot, or I can move that way and still have a really good chance of making that shot.
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we are joined by professional shooting coach Mike Dunn. Coach Dunn played at Philadelphia University, scoring over 1,300 points and finished second all-time in three-point field goals made. He was the CACC Rookie of the Year in 2005-2006. He's been teaching players to shoot since 2014, and Coach Dunn truly believes all players possess the ability to become great shooters. Like any skill, it can be learned. With the right information in combination with proper implementation, results become inevitable. You can learn more about his shooting program online at cmikeDunn.com. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
What's up, Coach?
How are you, brother?
Oh, man, this is an honor for me to get to talk with you. I feel like I've been following you for years now on Instagram and just stolen or borrowed so many great things from you. So what a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine, man. And it's all for the taking. You should, I tell everybody, you should take stuff all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's the way
that is what we do, right? In the game, we rarely create. It's more of borrowing and adapting the way that we like things to be. So I get that. But yeah, no, you're just one of those guys that at Faith we like to focus on shooting, as I feel like every high school program should.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly trying to learn new things. And so you're definitely one of those guys that caught my eye and piqued my interest to the way that you teach, and then the games that you show or drills, but then also now your involvement with SIQ basketball. So
Yeah.
all the above, man, you're pretty high on my list.
That's awesome, man. I'm happy to be here, brother. I'm happy to be here. And I thank you for being flexible for me too. I apologize that you know how the training schedule goes sometimes. It's up.
You're at the mercy of your clients at times. So I get that.
This is true.
How'd it go?
It went great. They went great. Young kids, 12 years old. Both of them are 12, back-to-back one-on-one sessions. So that age group is much different, obviously, than when you're working with, high schoolers, college guys, or pros. But it's always fun. It's a new challenge every time, right? Like you're breaking things down in a way that you can't just skate by with a 12-year-old. You have to really get them to understand what's happening. So it's, in a way they're teaching you, which is kind of a selfish way to look at it, but it's true.
So if you had to choose, or who do you prefer teaching? Or is it guys that are farther along in their development, that it's just minor tweaks that you have to give, or people that are more of a blank canvas that you can just help them from the very beginning to maybe eliminate some bad habits for down the road?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of both, but for me, it's more along the line of the mindset of the player. For one, do they want to be there, right? Like, I want them to want to be there. If they don't want to be there, then this isn't going to work no matter where you're at. But number two is, the more I do this and the more players I'm in front of, from a beginner to a pro, you start to pick up on this vibe of how invested are they really in it? Like are they willing to just do it over and over and over until they get it? And that's like the dream client, right? The dream client is the one who shows up and it's like, can't get enough of doing the same thing over and over, but recognizing the small nuances in it, right? And that's more so. So if you're a beginner and you have that mindset, or you're a pro, you have that, like, if I could snap my fingers and have anything I wanted, that would be it.
And that makes complete sense. And on the coaching side, one of the hardest areas I feel like to reach a player is about shot selection, and shot selection has a lot to do with their shot. Right. And so when you're talking to a player about that and making changes, you're talking about probably their most deeply held habits that they've been doing since they were young. They've had some success, even when you're little and you're chucking it up from your hip and you see it go in. That joy is just ingraining those habits. This is how I shoot, this is the way. And then you come in and you're like, now listen, we need to change some things. I can imagine you see real quick just where that player's heart is, because as a high school coach, I see it too.
Yeah, it's so true. The one benefit that I have is that, for better or for worse, I don't seek anybody out. So for the most part, when players are coming to me, it's them saying, it's almost like
they recognize the problem. Yeah,
they know there's something they need to get better at. So that's why I see them. It's not like they're just throwing some. There are situations like that, like with agencies and stuff. Like, you know, sometimes they'll send you a guy. The agency's like, hey, I want to send you a guy. But that's not the guy. That's not the kid's decision. And so then it's a kind of a weird. It's a weird dynamic, because the kid's kind of there because they're not necessarily they want to be there, but they've agreed to be there. And it's always an interesting thing to kind of juggle there.
I bet it's an interesting dance. You kind of have to kind of read them and see, but it's probably over the years really honed your skills with the players. One of my favorite things to do is to research and find new shooting games. You know, drills games, to me, there's sometimes there's a big difference, but I think a lot of times they're used, those words are used the same way. So for you, because you've posted quite a few cool ones that I've used it with my team. You walk into the gym, you have your choice. What's your favorite shooting game that just challenges you, but that you love?
It would be 99. And that's just make his three, misses -3, have to get to 99 points. By far my favorite, because it starts to put pressure on you in terms of makes, misses, all that kind of stuff. And part of the reason, in reality, you can reel off 33 in a row, right? So these are always threes, right? It's always threes. But, you know, say you do reel off 33 in a row, which is very possible for a higher level shooter. It's still mentally, when you hear 99, it's like, man, I made a lot of shots, but you really made 33, right? In my experience, getting a player to finally hit that number. So like sometimes we'll do that in a way where it's, you know, we baseline. Hey, we've never done it before. We're going to try it. So we have our baseline. But watching players know they have something to work to finally hit that 99 does something for them with their confidence that is kind of hard to explain. But I think there's just something about that number that, you know, a player has to fight to get to. And when they get to it, it's this breath of fresh air. I love that game.
So two things. If I'm in a gym with, you know, 18 to 20 players at a practice, that's definitely a game that I could see our team doing. Would you, for the sake of their training, would you have it to be where you start a clock from 0 and go up, and as soon as they're done, they look up to see what their time is? Would you have it be more, and what amount of time can you make 99? Because I understand the less shots is the better right. time. But sometimes it'd be hard with high school kids to count how many shots it took to get there and keep the score. But if they're just keeping the score and the time, would you think that's a good way to go about it?
I think the time can be an interesting thing for sure, because then you're adding another component to it, right? You're up against the clock as well. So now it's not just the score; it's the clock. What I've also found is that with some of my older guys, like they're not going to stop. Like they're not going to stop until they hit 99, and that's just the way it's going to be. So if our session was scheduled for an hour, maybe we're there an hour and a half, but they're going to eventually, and then it turns into a conditioning thing. And so like it starts to turn into this, and then it becomes just this mental battle. So I love the idea of the time, and maybe I'll start implementing that just so it gets me out of the gym.
Maybe, but yeah, we're like, for me, because I have such a wide range of shooters, and they're, you know, how competent they are. So like some I could see getting done with this relatively quick. If you're going like 4-1, 4-1, 4-1.
Yep.
That score will increase. You'll get closer.
Yep.
But then for the sake of time, guys, we're going to cap it at 4 minutes. So you either get there or you're done at 4. But you're right on the money with even the guys that can go 33 straight. The beauty, it's not a lot of shots, but the great thing about it is every shot has key components that practice needs, which is pressure and speed.
Yep.
Like you got to shoot fast because you want to get to you want to get there in a good amount of time, but then also pressure on every shot. I think that game nails it.
Yeah. I'm a fan. It's simple, right? It's a very simple thing, but I've found that in shooting, whether it's whatever what I'm teaching with shooting, I'm trying to simplify things as much as possible within the shot itself. So why not keep the game fairly simple, but still, introduce those external pressures.
Would you have them same spot or shoot?
Never. Yeah. Never allowed to shoot the same shot twice.
Okay.
Never allowed to shoot the same shot twice.
There's so many rabbit holes we could go down to with all that, but how many times have you done the 33 in a row?
I don't think I've ever done it personally. I've seen one person come close. Nick Stauskas came close. But Nick, you're talking about, top of the top in terms
he's
of
an outlier. Yeah.
But, I've gotten miss 1, miss 2. But yeah, I've seen, I know some guys now that like I worked with before that haven't worked and we didn't do that game, that 100% would rattle off 33 like it was nothing for sure.
Man, that's just another level right there. I just don't know if a lot of people understand how hard it. Yeah.
There's a guy I worked with in the very beginning that I can't take credit for anything he did shooting the ball, like because he could just shoot. But I just put him through workouts. And his whole thing, he was trying to catch on in the G League, and I think he did for a little bit, but he just wanted to play in the NBA. Like that was it. And but he was just slow, man. Like he was so slow. But to this day, I've never seen anybody shoot the ball the way that he shot it. He was like 6'4". But I would design workouts of all NBA threes because if he was going to make it, that's it. Like that's all he was going to be doing.
He had to be a specialist.
Yeah. Specialist. All NBA threes on the move. Right, nonstop movement. We go 250 makes. Like that was the get. Like that's we have an hour. We're gonna get 250 makes of nonstop movement. And he'd have days where he'd miss like 10 shots, and it was like, and that's just who he was, man. And that was the top. Like that. I wish kids could see that. Like that's a guy who'd never made it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because for a variety of reasons, like 6'4", not athletic. But he could shoot and worked his butt off to get athletic, but just never get it. And there's guys like that out there, man.
You see it sometimes in the league where, like right now, when you and I are talking, it's early May, and NBA playoffs are still going on, and Duncan Robinson hasn't been getting off the bench. And for a few years, he's one of the top shooters in the league. But then somebody a little bit bigger that can also shoot, but can guard and rebound and bring just another element. And all of a sudden he's playing at the end of the game. So as much as you and I would love to believe that shooting, it is the most important thing. There are other areas of the game where you got to be competitive and be able to play.
100%. 100%.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. Confidence. Confidence is a word, especially with high school players and parents, that gets thrown around quite a bit. So how do you teach shooting confidence with players?
Yeah, there's 2 sides to it. I literally did like a mini clinic for an AAU group yesterday, and we had the same conversation because a kid asked it. It was, that's right in the forefront of every kid's mind, whether they want to admit it or not, right? That's always there. And I approach it from 2 sides, right? You approach it from the physical side, right? From you're only going to ever, reap the rewards of what you're doing if you're actually putting in the time, right? How deliberate is your practice? How much time are you spending actually paying attention to where it is you need to get better, right? And when we take care of that, then we shift to the mental side. And in all reality, in a perfect world, we would spend almost just as much time up here as we spend with everything else. But you see it all the time. You see these guys that have incredible gifts and physical talents, but they break down up top and probably aren't doing enough work when it comes to that. I'm a big nerd in a way that any player that I've ever worked with will tell you I'm throwing books at them. I'm talking to them about visualization type things. But one of my favorite things I've ever read was a quote, and I believe it was by Neville Goddard. I'm not sure, but he said, before you can do something, you must first be something, right? And you have to take on, I tell my players, you have to take on this persona of you are a shooter. You are going to make shots. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to go through lulls. Like, that's going to happen 100%. But who are you at your core, right? Who are you when you're just walking around? You have to see yourself as that shooter. You have to see yourself as that guy that knocks down shots. You have to embody that before it even happens for you. And the more you can put that in your mind, right, the easier things are going to start to come to you in terms of a confidence perspective. And I just think it goes so far beyond basketball.
Yeah.
For me, I always tell, I'm such a good, I never used to think that way. And then my whole life changed when I started thinking that way. I started seeing myself as a teacher. I was like, I'm a teacher. And then people were like, well, who are you teaching? I was like, well, nobody yet, but I'm learning. And I know I'm going to but it's so powerful. The mind is so powerful that if we're not working on it, if we're not feeding it information, if we're not learning, unlearning, then it's going to be really, really difficult to ever, develop that confidence that we need. So it's that balance of the physical side and then the mental side.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think you can't, as a player, you can't underestimate how connected those two are.
Yeah.
Because the physical side, or the preparation, actually doing the work, putting in the time, like, you can't look in the mirror and lie to yourself.
Yeah.
To a point, if you once you've done the work, then that mental side drives home. Because I've done that, I am this.
Yes.
But you can't say, I tell players all the time, I've never done flying lessons. I've never sat time in a simulator. I don't have any flight time. If I was to go onto a plane, go up to the cockpit, knock on the door, open up and say, listen, I got this. Go ahead, have a seat, have some peanuts. I'll take it the rest of the way. I said, even though I'm confident, I've told myself I can do this, we will die. But I feel like a lot of some shooters, that is their problem. They're confident, but without really the right to be that. But then I think the more common side is what you and I see is kids have put in the time, but now they're just, it's between their ears.
Yeah. I went to a PGC clinic one time. They brought me out to go to a PGC clinic to see their shooting clinic. And one of my favorite things that they said during that clinic was they said NATO, not attached
to outcome. Oh yeah.
And it was such a simple but powerful thing. And they said it, and I'm like watching the kids in the room, and I feel like they looked at it like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, they're kids, right? But I was sitting there, I was like, that's such because I'm always preaching it. But the way that they defined it was so simple, easy to remember. That was just, yeah.
Talk about a mind shift though, right there.
Yeah.
The moment that it leaves your fingertips, it's over. You can't change the outcome. And the only thing that you can do now is start preparing for what's next, what you can't control. But I mean, even as a player, that was hard for me but like you nailed it though. Talking about shooting and all those things, these are life lessons.
Yeah. It's all
that will carry on.
Yeah. I think it just goes, man, I get to work with so many kids, and I feel so blessed to be able to do it. And I was talking to a guy the other day, and I was like, man, if what I do only is confined to the basketball court with these young men that I oftentimes get a chance to come across at a really cool stage of their life, then I'm selling those kids short. And so everything I do, and I think they would tell you too, maybe maybe I'm annoying with it, but I'm always trying to get them to see the bigger picture of where they're going in life, and how these small disciplines now are going to carry over, and they're going to be so far ahead of their peers as they start to get older, because they're reading 10 books this summer, or they're doing all these things that the average person, when they become adults, don't do. And if they can start to make that a habit, I mean, sky's the limit in terms of what they're going to be able to accomplish down the line.
Yeah. How many adults lose their growth mindset when they leave school or when they get established in a certain job or field? That'd be interesting to kind of see.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, I don't want to say it, but they said, "Don't let school get in the way of your education." Is one of my favorite quotes of all time, because of course school serves its purpose and everything, but when it ends, or even when you're in it, there's other things that you can continuously educate yourself on to make you better at what you want to do, or you can go a million different ways with that. But
the great philosopher Phil Jackson, right? He said there's more to life than basketball, but there's more to basketball than basketball. And I can't imagine a greater way to teach these lessons that will stick than also with something that happens to be the most fun part of basketball, which is shooting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think, if you had a guess, what's the percentage? I have an idea in my head. There's no facts behind it. It's just what I feel. The percentage of people that struggle with form to the mental side. And let's just say, let's get away from, such horrific or huge issues that they are never going to be able to replicate that over the long haul. But a kid has decent form, but or in the mental side, what's holding them back? What do you think that percentage is?
I guess it would skew towards the mental side. I think, you know what I mean? I think you're probably looking at, I don't know the number. I'll say 60%. We'll say 60.
Okay.
I'll say that route.
I go 90-10.
Yeah.
I think I just think of, at Faith, I've been blessed to be here 9 years. And we just spend a lot of time on shooting and their shots and their mentality and how great shooters train. And I've seen guys with clean form that I'm watching them. I'm like, okay, I know they put in the time because they're in front of me and we do these things, but the ball really doesn't seem to know where it's going, or there's no consistency. But I'm filming them slow. I'm looking from the side. I'm watching them react. And then at the end of the day, there has to be this belief involved. And I that's where I just go with this 90-10. I think it's 10% form. Once you get past the horrible things, and they get the few of those basics down, man, all up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just my thought.
Sure. Yeah, I like it. That's a great backup to the percentages. I had zero thought put into my my percentages.
Daily vitamins, you kind of hear this term now with training, but I just think, just like you and I, you're way younger than me, but trying to stay active, we got to eat right. We have to take vitamins every day. We have to do these things. What would you say the daily habits or vitamins for a shooter needs to be?
It's all going to be unique to the individual, obviously. But I think the habits, the biggest thing that I come across with players is we establish what needs to be worked on, right? We establish, okay, let's just say for an example, is this a connection issue? Is that ball being treated like it's not a part of your body? And because it's not, we're seeing, the inability to transfer energy efficiently, or that ball's taking multiple direction changes, right? Let's just say it's a connection issue. We can say, okay, well, our daily vitamins for these connection issues are going to be all connection related, quote unquote, drills. Okay. I don't care how many drills I give you. It does not matter how many drills I give you. What matters is how much dedicated time can you spend to being as deliberate and mindful as possible on what you're doing, right? So to me, it's blocking out a time. It's not blocking out 100 reps, not blocking out, I got to do 10,000 drills today. I'm going to block out 30 minutes in which all I'm going to devote myself to is how focused can I be on connection? How in tune can I be with how this body's now becoming a part of, or this ball's becoming a part of my body, right? And in that, what new connections am I going to start to fire up top here that are going to set me up for a breakthrough later on down the line? And that's so hard to do. I get it. Like, that's such a hard thing to go in the gym and have such a dedicated focus, but it's the only way which things start to connect that didn't connect before. And if you can go in with a deliberate plan, as simple as it can be, I tell players, you could do one drill for the rest of your life and you can get increasingly better if you just know what it is you're doing and what you're focusing on. So, I think to overly simplify it, it's just how deliberate can you be with the time that you carve out for yourself while you're working on shooting. I think that's the big thing.
Man, that's such a great reminder for coaches too. Like, I think I needed to hear that, because I get asked about shooting and how our teams shoot and the drills and things we do. And we can just kind of clutter our days or our practice time with, or constantly be searching for the new thing, when really, it's not about what you do, it's how you do what you do that really matters. And that's just a great reminder for coaches that feel like they need a new shooting drill. Well, maybe you want to keep it interesting with the guys that you see 187 days of the year, so they don't get stale or bored. But maybe you just need to take what you're already doing and refocus, repurpose, reconnect. Right.
And it's one of those things where, like, when I started learning the stuff that I'm now teaching, and a huge, I always tell him all the time, like my guy, Rob Fodor, who's a shooting coach for the Heat. Like, I'll call him out of the blue and I'll just be like, dude, thank you so much for what I was doing. But I would literally wake up before I was working a 9-to-5 job at the time when I first started doing it. And I would go to the gym before work, and I would take one piece of this stuff that I was learning, and I would personally do it over and over and over. And it was in doing it, maybe I would do it for a week. And then all of a sudden something clicked in terms of something that Rob told me months ago that now it makes sense. But I had to go through it, and I had to be that deliberate about going through it, that I've seen the value in it personally, and being able to kind of push that on to the kids in terms of this mindset. It can be really powerful stuff, man.
I've never heard somebody talk about that. And I'm struggling to remember exactly how you said it, but basically the ball being connected to your body.
Right.
You had like a specific phrase with that.
Yeah. So it's just in terms of connection and period. Yeah. So the ball becomes a part of us.
How do you one, diagnose that maybe that's a problem? And how do you work that into a player's routine or practice?
So if I'm looking at terms of the connection issue, it's generally going to be how are their hands situated on the basketball? So if I can kind of see the top of their hand before a shot starts, I can automatically tell you how that ball is going to move through their shot. So I know that if that hand starts on top of the shot, that's automatically going to result in their hands loading later at the top of the shot, which means that ball had to travel backwards, right? So already now that ball's traveling backwards before it's going forward. So
you're telling me if that wrist is straight or gooseneck, like you see sometimes, that means on the way up, they're having to move backwards to want. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Okay. So I always tell players, our target's in front of us, not behind us. Right. Let's start to make this and let's start to take away as much variability as possible, and start to move this ball up our body in a way that we can keep everything, quote unquote, going towards the basket. There's going to be slight direct. We're not robots, right? Mm-hmm. We're not like those shooting machines from half court, but we can mimic how that ball starts to move. So it starts with how that ball connects to the shooting hand, and then the closer that ball starts to come to our body to a degree, we're now setting ourselves up to actually use our shoulders, how they're intended to be used in terms of how they rotate. But a lot of times you'll see players when they start, their elbows will be extended away, right? And eventually, like, we all have to come back to this position, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if I start with the ball and my arms actually in this position, well, now I have a collapsing angle at the top. So now that ball has to go backwards before it goes forwards. We have to be more perfect than not to make shots. We're just trying to connect in a way that how can we now make this ball a part of us and how we would create energy vertically by driving that ball up, rotating our shoulder how it's meant to rotate, hand comes under the ball early, and then keeping that ball moving in one direction. And then there's like a bunch of other things that come into play in terms of the sequencing of the mat, like all that kind of stuff. But connection plays such a huge role and in that. So make the ball a piece of you and how you create energy best as a person, and things tend to get a bit better for you.
The Jamodi podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
You're a head coach at a high school. How would you teach shot selection with your team?
So I'm going to be like, I would be crazy as a head coach in terms of how we taught shooting in general. I would spend so much time on it to the point where a lot of people will come in and say you're crazy for it. But my high school coach put in an insane amount of time to do that development side of things. And he had everything scheduled out time-wise. We devoted this X amount of time to this every single day, no matter what else we had to do. It was always developed or concentrated on the shooting side of things. We had to do it. We had to do it. Through that, I watched players while I was in high school get increasingly better over the course of the season. I'm a bit of an optimist in that I would reel guys back. So should I have to? But if we're in the gym all together and we're putting in that time each and every day, and I see you putting in that time, I don't want you second guessing yourself should the opportunity present itself. I want you to think about, we've spent 15 to 20 minutes every day. And on face value, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. But
Compound effect.
Oh my gosh, right? Yeah. And so it's like I don't want to limit a player that I'm watching and I know he's putting in the time. With that being said, if my 7-foot center just can't figure it out, we're going to have a conversation. We're probably not going to shoot a wide open threes. It's just the case. It's just probably not going to happen. But I would like to think in a perfect world, I would offer a lot of leeway for my players given the time that we would spend on what we're doing.
See, I think you're right on the money. I think you'd make a great high school coach just because of that way of thinking. One is the amount of time that you would spend to shooting, the most important action. Bobby Knight says the most important skill in basketball. So like it's what we need to spend our time on. And the fact that you would do that, you would get more buy-in from your players. The coaches will ask me from time to time about, what we do with shooting. And or how much time do we spend on it? I say, 50 to 60%. They're like, what do you mean? I was like, however much time we have that day for practice, if it's 2 hours, 50 to 60% is on shooting. They're like, well, what about this and this and this? I was like, okay, I just choose to believe that shooting and working on it will lead to winning more than that out of bounds play, that defensive possession, and anything like that. Which, right now there might be some people that click off this episode right for that. But because of the games that you would have your guys playing and the way that you would probably chart things and have, hey, raise your hand if you made your 99 in this amount. You start to do that every day. Shot selection and role identification takes care of itself, which the 7-footer won't be shooting threes like the guy that hits 99 in a minute and a half, because he just knows at this point. So I think you would be great at it, man.
I mean, I don't know if I'd be great at it, but that's perfect world scenario. That's how I would see it for sure.
One thing that I think is in high school coaching, you have some debate on is footwork. And starting out, and I think all of us as coaches, we start out teaching the things that we were taught as players. And so if I was taught stride stopper, always inside foot, always on the catch, moving one foot, stepping into it. I, for years, outlawed the hop and wouldn't, hey, the hop is slow hop. And then, you grow and you mature, you start watching people like you or you watch JJ Redick. I'm like, golly, he's doing both, but, and maybe I led you too much there. Where are you on the catch shooting, step or hop? Where are you kind of with players in that?
We spend a bunch of time on both. I'm getting away from even calling it a hop.
Yeah.
I call it a drop.
Okay.
And so one of the things that
I saw you put a video about that. You slowed a guy down, and as he caught it, I think it was Clay. As he caught it, you said drop in it. Yeah.
You watch him at his level. If this is his hip level and he's coming in this midway, and on that catch, he sinks, right? He doesn't come up because a hop considers us hopping, right? So he sinks. And so this is one of those things where in 2018, 19, Rob was teaching me the vertical drop. One of the things that he does with all the players in Miami is called a vertical drop. So he'll take a player, chest up, chin up, eyes up, right? And then you're standing straight up and down. And now we almost sink down into the floor, but we have to keep the same posture that we originally had. And what they teach guys to do there is no matter how they move on the floor, they move within that vertical drop. So when they're on the move, whether they're going into a catch and shoot scenario off a sprint, whatever have you, we're always in that most athletic position possible. And what you can start to do with that, I'm going on my high horse about a hop or on a drop, because I've found it to be so valuable for players to get balanced while on the move. Like, so we can drop, we start our movement. Okay, we recognize a catch and shoot opportunity. Maybe we're sprinting off of a handoff, or maybe we're sprinting into a catch and shoot. We can start to then implement that same drop on the catch, where we catch with our front foot and then immediately bring that ball into what we call our one position and then drop to that level. And it centers us, man. It centers us in an incredible way, in which running away from the basket, I haven't found a better way to balance yourself. Versus a 1-2 running away from the basket is really, really tough depending on the side. If you're a right-handed shooter and that right shoulder is already close to the rim, much easier. But if you're coming up that opposite side where that right shoulder has to swing, a la JJ Redick, who was amazing at it for some odd reason, that becomes really difficult. So I preach a lot of the drop. It gets players to the floor really quickly. And so long as that kind of ties into how I teach the preparation side of things, starting to understand hands always before feet in terms of how our hands are being prepared and getting to position. So when that drop happens, our hands are already prepared, feet hit the floor. That's our sign for our eject button, and that ball's out of there. So I teach that a lot. And then I teach a lot of the 1-2 as well, especially if we're being chased. If you're coming around like a curl screen, something like that, you're going to implement the 1-2 being chased, or a lot of times coming behind the ball.
Or off the bounce with the kind of more of a boom 1-2. It's still that 1-2, but the ability to stop on a dime, allow that defender to keep going, gain some separation. That's helpful.
Yeah, you need it all. You need it all. And it just comes, to me, everything comes down to how we prepare our hands. And then if we can prepare our hands in a way that we can get them ready ahead of the feet, now we're playing a different game than everybody else.
Will you go a little bit deeper into that?
So everything stems from the ability to sequence correctly in terms of how we create energy. So the ball has to lead the way to get to that quote unquote two set point. We call it the 2. But that ball has to get to that 2 while the hips are still loaded in order to maximize our body's ability to create leverage, right? If our hands aren't ready off the move, especially off the dribble, what often tends to happen with shooters is their body starts to come up before the ball has a chance to lead the way. And now we're at a place where, our hands have to play catch up at the top of the shot. You'll see players oftentimes either release it super early, so the ball juts out on a line drive, or they'll release late when they're almost releasing on the way down. And what being able to prepare the hands and moving kind of in a different way, what it does is, if we're always waiting on our feet because our hands are ahead of everything else, we're always able to sequence correctly. And if we're always able to sequence correctly, we're always able to create energy in a consistent way in which we're able to release that ball more so on the way up each time. And then it falls into, well, my hands are ready, so now I can connect. So now I'm connecting. So now there's no backwards movement. I'm now creating energy the way I need to. So all of that stuff starts to get really nerdy, but it's
I dig it. I'm sorry, I even forgot that we were on a call together. Like, or on that, I just started to. Yeah, that's good.
It's it starts to become a lot of fun. I was like, for example, I was with a kid he plays for the Wizards the other day, and we were in the gym, and that's all we worked on was in terms of understanding this early preparation, which he had never done. And like halfway through it, he was like, this makes so much sense. He was like, it's never been this easy to shoot off the dribble. But it's a completely different way than, like we said, we often start out teaching what we were taught. I mean, it goes against everything you've been taught, right? It goes against everything so much, but it's the same way we want that shot to become a part of our body. When we start to shoot the ball off the dribble, that dribble now, we need to let that ball move with us as opposed to away from us. Our body can only cover the same amount of ground that it can cover, right? But if we can start to learn to let that ball move with us, it sets us up for the whole preparation piece, and life becomes so much easier as a shooter.
A buddy of mine, Matt Garnett, we do a shooting camp together down here in Texas. He likes to tell players after campers, after we're making some adjustments, like, you know, your shot should feel good. Like, it should feel good. I think there's like feel good coming out of your hands, out of your body, in a fluid motion. And I think that's maybe a little bit of a click moment for them. And kind of what you're talking about is, you know, oh wow, like that kid responding, oh wow, this feels different. But he probably is saying, like, this feels really good. And a shot should not feel painful.
Yeah.
Or like you're laboring to get it there. Should feel good.
For a guy like that particular kid, like that's a kid that he's in his position because he can shoot the basketball. Little things like that can start to be the separator in terms of a 3-year career or a 15-year career. Right. And that's a lot. Like I tell players, especially like my overseas guys, like it's a lot of commas in the bank account, man. You know what I mean? And that's what you're after to do. Like add the commas to the bank account, and that kind of stuff can be the separating factor that puts you over the edge, that you're starting to shoot better off the dribble than anybody else is. And it's really cool to see.
Kind of a little bit of rapid fire here. Look at the rim when you shoot, or follow the ball when you shoot, or does it matter?
Look at the rim all the way up until that ball leaves the hand. But if you can lock in on the rim the whole time, I tell players to lock in on the rim. Growing up, like I found the rim, and then I just, to this day, I just watch it. I watch it after the fact.
I'm kind of blown away by the guys that can shoot and then their eyes can find that target. But you see some of the best shooters do that.
Yeah.
Slow motion, they do. So I've stopped telling guys to stop doing it, but I'm kind of with you.
Eyes to the rim as soon as possible. Locate your target, let it go, and then I don't go crazy over it after. But
a kid's thumb and offhand interference is, especially early on, I see that being a big issue with players not having maybe their hand underneath or all the. How do you correct thumbing it with a player? There's things like the shooting strap. A guy named Jay Wolf. Really love the way he teaches it, and I understand it's not like one of those big pads or something like that. And then, or you put a quarter or a paper clip in between your thumb and your guide hand. How do you keep them from thumbing it?
Yeah, I don't use anything. Everything that we do first, we'll use one hand shooting to start in terms of how the ball moves, and it's not set the ball high and go. It's actually about kind of relearning how that ball needs to move up our body. So ball will start by the waist and then super connected, putting the shooting elbow behind you. And then we'll just concentrate on just sliding this ball up this right side. They'll start to get a good flow in terms of understanding how that ball needs to move, but it also forces the correct sequencing. No one's going to shoot a one-hand shot with their body coming up too early. And then what I do is I just introduce the guide hand in a way that's going to consistently touch the basketball, but we're still shooting one-hand shots. But we're just starting to get used to what it's like to have pressure there. And what tends to happen is I go through a pretty much like a 4-part series of these slides in which there's more and more pressure being added as we're shooting this one-hand shot, to the point where you kind of trick a player into a slide at the bottom with the guide hand that then turns into a normal shot. And it starts to just inch them to understanding where that shooting hand has to be. And then we're able to now relieve pressure from the guide hand, which long-term becomes an extremely beneficial thing, because whether you're a bad shooter learning or a really, really good shooter, the more you can start to learn to eliminate guide hand pressure means you can now get pickups in various situations and still get through that shot. Because once the shooting hand's on the ball, that's it. We're done. Like, that shooting hand's not going to move. The guide hand's going to have to. So that's kind of the way I go. It's all about the relieving of pressure, getting our shoulders to work together. That's a big thing too, in terms of the symmetrical aspect of things. Shoulders, elbows, a lot of it, I want it to synchronize as much as possible and just let the body work how it's intended to work.
Me and Gannon Baker are 10 toes guys. Well, at least I saw a video that old video that he said 10 toes. It's just how comfortable for me. There's the turn. Where are you with how your feet should be planted when you shoot?
It's all predicated by what type of shooter you are in terms of the shot line. So if your shot line is somebody, if I'm right-handed and my shot line is very right side dominant, I'm all for the 10 toes. But if I'm somebody that really likes bringing that ball up a bit more middle, and where I find, which I am, there's going to be a slight tilt there and bring that shoulder to the side. And then it's kind of like what you said earlier in terms of almost like throwing that dart. So it's largely predicated on, is the guy really comfortable on the right side, or is he more comfortable bringing the ball up middle? And that's where we start to work for. And I see both all of the time, right? So I don't completely, commit myself to just one. I'm going to watch what a player does and how they move the basketball, and then we'll talk about it. But toes always pointed in the same direction. That's my only thing, whether it's 10 toes to the rim or 10 toes. But I see it, like you'll see it. Like people's feet will be pointed out. So that's my big thing.
You're right. You kind of nailed it. Like all of these, the trick answer to all of these scenarios is both, or it's about the player and their anatomy, what's comfortable for them. Last one, even though it's probably the same, ball on the finger pads only, not touching the heel of your hand, or ball touching the heel. What are your thoughts?
Can I tell you where I think this whole argument comes from?
Yes.
All right. So everybody has been to so how old are you?
40.
Okay. So I'm 35. So we're not that far off. Right. So at basketball camp, when you went as a kid, right? Right. Exactly. So they would come in there and they would say, this is no fault. I think this was actually, in my opinion, a genius thing to do. But this is why I think that the argument started. You need a way to show kids, right, that we don't want the ball just in the palm, right? Because if you're showing the kids that, and you just put the ball just in the palm and it's not even touching the fingers, and then they wiggle it around, right? Like, oh, we have no control that way. And they say, well, if I just put the ball on my fingertips and I have all this space, well, now I have no control that way. And you try to find that happy medium, which then turned into that small little gap when a coach
put your finger there and see how I can see.
which visually for a kid actually makes tons of sense. But everybody's hand, like the ball's always going to touch the palm. Like I unless you're really concentrated on that ball's always going to touch the palm. That doesn't mean you're a palm shooter. Like, to me, the only way you'd be a palm shooter is if you shot like a shot put.
Yeah, that's right.
That ball's always going to roll off your fingers, and you're going to try to control with your finger pad. So I think that's where that whole thing is stemmed from. I've thought way too much about it, but because it always comes, like, everybody likes to argue about it. I'm like, what are we arguing? Like this, I think that there's so many more important parts of shooting that we should be talking about. Like, it's going to maybe touch a bit of the palm.
Such a minor issue, guys. Let's let that one go.
It's social media fodder at this point. It's just like,
Micah Lancaster's one of my favorite follows also, and we do a lot of the I'm Possible training here at Faith. He is, every month or two, he's good for a video that comes out that just kind of blasts some of those old traditions or things that we've always thought. And he brings this other side to it that it just kind of gets me thinking.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. It's good to think that way, right? You have to challenge everything anyway. That's what it is.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Ballology. What's your BSA score? The Ballology Skills Assessment is the only verified skills metric endorsed by the NAIA, NJCAA, and a growing number of NCAA coaches to discover and develop the best talent for your team. This 4-minute, 40-shot test can be taken free today on the Bology mobile app. Elevate your game. All right, speed round. Short questions.
Okay.
First thing that pops in your head. So you have so many, not just Instagram followers, but people that truly follow you and how you teach and work out with you. But now they're really going to get to know you.
All right. Let's do it.
Favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Oh, that's good. For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Shot clock.
Texting or talking?
Depends who it is.
Great answer. Great answer. Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving, and it shouldn't be a debate.
Invisibility or super strength?
Super strength.
Favorite NBA player of all time?
Tracy McGrady. Yeah.
I mean, he's from my time too. That's a good one.
Man. That's who I wanted to be.
Really?
I mean, like, you couldn't tell me when I was 13 that I wasn't Tracy McGrady.
Mm-hmm. If he could have been on some better teams, but then also his injuries.
Yeah, his injuries
held him back. Yeah,
the back injuries. But he was there was a point in time where it was him or Kobe. Like, who's the best player in the league? And I was team T-Mac. I remember my best friend at the time. He was team Kobe because we grew up not too far from Lower Merion, so he was at all his high school games. So he was like ride or die Kobe Bryant. I was a T-Mac guy.
But it's a good point. Your body's your meal ticket, and so how many other guys could be not exactly like a Kobe, because there are a lot of parts of him that are so unique, but the longevity of him, Jordan, LeBron, it's just really hard to do that.
It's not an accident either, right?
No, it's $1 million a year that LeBron spends on his body. You're right.
Right.
If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
I go back to high school. Just for the basketball side of things. I was never like a social type person. Like, I could care less about that stuff. But the basketball side of things in high school was the most free, fun,
pure.
It was so pure. And you realize that after the fact, just how we had just a special group. We had such a special group of guys, and we did some amazing things. And you don't realize that in the moment, but I would go back to that for sure.
I got 3 more. Favorite childhood TV show?
Fresh Prince.
Nice. For guys, it's usually Fresh Prince, or I'm a Saved by the Bell guy, because
I mean, Fresh Prince was my show, though.
Zach had the ability to pause time, so he's a superhero. and Kelly Kapowski. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
1 to 2.
Okay, always in that range. Never. Coaches, it's just funny to hear. Some are like up to 6 or 8. And
it's more of like a ritual. I don't really need it. But I do a bunch of work at a coffee shop. And so I go in there and I just get a coffee, and sometimes I don't even finish it, but it's like the act of actually just getting it and then doing what I do. So
that's awesome. Last one, probably the most important, Godfather or Star Wars. It could be neither, though.
Well, it's an easy question. I've never seen Godfather, so it's and I married an Italian woman, so it's like sacrilegious that I've done that. I've never seen Godfather, but it's Star Wars for me. I love Star Wars. I think it's the hero's journey, man. Like, there's nothing.
The dark and the light, man.
And then Yoda. I mean, are you kidding me, man? Like,
you can't. Yoda
is one of the greatest characters. Like, the wisdom. Like, it's. I'm gonna end up watching it tonight now.
Let's go. Do you even see now? I knew the Force was strong with you from the very beginning. I could feel. Do you even go through like the whole canon, like the Clone Wars and things like that? Because I've never done that, like the cartoon-ish stuff.
No, I can't even. Look, the way that I would do it is, my dad and I would watch it as kids when I was a kid. So I watched it, and then when the new ones would come out, I'm just going to see it. I can't even tell you the titles. Like, I can't. It got to a point where it's a blur. But if there's a new Star Wars movie out,
man, Coach, this has been so much fun. I love getting to talk shooting, learn from great minds like yourself. Before we get off, tell us a little bit about. I mean, if there are coaches or players or parents that are listening to this and like, man, I want to know how I can follow this guy, learn from this guy. What can they do?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on social media. So I'm really active on Instagram, at C Mike Dunn, and then I have I developed this virtual coaching service that has been incredible. And one of my goals when I first started doing this was to get in front of as many people as I could. And this has allowed me to do that. And I literally work with players all day virtually, players, coaches, trainers, parents. And it's a really, really cool way to learn shooting in a much different way than a lot of us grew up with. And I've seen some incredible transformations from it. But you can learn all about that kind of stuff in terms of and other programs that I have at cmikedunn.com.
And then you and I both, obviously you can see I've got the SIQ ball behind. Yeah. They're not an official sponsor of the podcast, but I love what they do. I had a lot of my players get on it because, yep. I mean, to me, the gun is great. The NOAA is great, but this has the technology in the ball that you don't need, but you've come on board with them. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been approached by numerous companies in terms of shooting products, and I say no to all of them. Just because I see a lot of them as very gimmicky, and I got to stay true to who I am. So they came to me and they're like, "This is what this ball does." Da, da, da. I was like, for me, this is incredible. Like I was in there today, I was like, I'm just gonna put up 100 shots, right? Let's just chart it. And I just think in terms of being able to see things, okay, makes misses is one thing, that's great. But then starting, the swish factor of things. I have players that like that's all we focus. Like we've reached a point of shooting where every workout, the only makes that count are swishes. So like the fact that it picks up on that kind of stuff, it picks up on shot speed. If we have a long shot, well, we need to shorten this up. It's usually a connection issue, a direction change issue, and now we can actually see, okay, we're taking time off of this because of that way that we're now moving the basket. There's just so many little things in there that you can start to interpret data in a way that brings everything back to how I teach. And that's the only reason I signed up for it, because it just makes sense to me and how I teach and what I want players to be able to come back and use as feedback.
Thank you so much for your time. This was great, man.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.